Ashley Nicole Bush was born to parents Randy and Rhonda Boone in Rogers, Arkansas on August 1, 1989. She was described as a very loving individual who enjoyed helping others. In 2022, 33-year-old Ashley was a divorced mother of 3, engaged to Josh Willis, living in Maysville, Arkansas. Ashley was also 31 weeks pregnant with a baby girl she had already named Valkyrie Willis. Unfortunately, she was having some complications during the pregnancy and was ordered by her physician to take time off work and rest. However, that would put them in a financial bind, so she began looking for work-at-home jobs when she stumbled upon a Facebook group for moms looking for employment. On October 25, 2022, she came across a woman in the group named Lucy Barrows, who said she could give her some free baby clothes and help her get a job working from home. 3 days later, Josh and Ashley met Lucy at the Gravette Public Library to discuss the potential opportunity. However, Josh quickly felt that something was off. Meanwhile, Lucy gave Ashley a bunch of paperwork and said they would email her about setting up an interview with the boss. She would then be required to travel to Bentonville to meet the boss. At 11:45 a.m. on October 31, 2022, despite Josh's concerns, he dropped Ashley off at the Handy Stop gas station in Maysville to ride to Bentonville with Lucy. Sadly, that would be the worst mistake of his life. It turns out that Lucy's real name was Amber Waterman, and she had used a fake Facebook account to lure Ashley with the prospect of a job so she could kidnap her unborn child and raise it as her own. All this because she had been faking pregnancy for the last few months. It's unclear where they went or if there really was an interview, but around 3 p.m., Josh received a text from Ashley saying they were in Gravette and he could come pick her up. After arriving, he saw Amber's truck with Ashley inside pass by, but they continued driving. He tried to follow the truck but lost them as they headed north on Highway 43. Sadly, that was the last time he ever saw her alive. He knew immediately something was wrong and called the police. Her family was able to track her phone and found it in a ditch about half a mile from where she was last seen in Maysville. Unbeknownst to them, Amber had driven Ashley back to her house where she shot and killed her. She then removed the baby from Ashley's womb, but sadly she was stillborn. Afterward, she called 911 and told them she went into labor and the baby was stillborn. After hanging up, she and her husband began driving to the hospital, but the ambulance intercepted them at the Longview store in McDonald County, Missouri. Valkyrie was then pronounced dead at the scene, and Amber refused medical treatment. The baby was then taken to a funeral home, and the coroner took the placenta. The following day, investigators came to Amber's house and asked her where she was the day before. She said she had been home all day with her son and another child when she went into labor. They asked if she knew Ashley, but she said she didn't. Amber and her husband, Jamie, agreed to let investigators search their home and her truck, which matched the one that Ashley was last seen in. They also asked for her phone, but she claimed she lost it. She was then asked about Lucy Barrows, and Amber claimed they worked together at Walmart, but were not close. That same day, Amber and Jamie showed up at the funeral home for the planned ceremony for poor little Valkyrie. While there, Amber said she wanted to have the baby cremated. It's crazy to think that she went through an entire funeral process for a child that wasn't even hers. While there, the coroner showed up to perform an autopsy on the baby and said that Amber began expressing her concerns about a DNA test. The coroner also noted that the baby appeared to have been cut out of its womb. That's when Jamie decided to confess to investigators that Amber had murdered Ashley. 2 days later, on November 3rd, investigators returned with search warrants for their property. That's when they found Ashley's body. It turns out that this whole time, her husband, Jamie, thought she really was pregnant. She didn't tell him the truth until investigators came by 2 days earlier. She then led them to Ashley's body, which was wrapped in a blue tarp near their home. He decided to help get rid of the body by burning it in a fire pit. He then put Ashley's burned remains in the back of his GMC pickup truck, drove a short distance away, and hid them. All this took place before going to the funeral home. After discovering her remains, both Amber and Jamie were arrested. Amber was charged with the murder of Ashley and her unborn baby girl, and Jamie was charged with accessory after the fact. In the end, Amber pleaded guilty to the charges, and as of August 2024, her sentencing date is set for October 15, 2024. As for Jamie, his trial is set to take place the same month as Amber's sentencing. Krista Ray Halderson was born on January 25, 1968, in Madison, Wisconsin, and graduated from Madison East High School in 1986. At some point, she met Bart Halderson, who was born on May 14, 1971, and graduated from Balders High School. They fell in love and married on July 30, 1994. Both attended the University of Wisconsin, where they earned bachelor's degrees. After college, they had 2 sons named Mitchell and Chandler. In 2021, they were living in Windsor, Wisconsin, and enjoyed going to college football games in Madison and concerts in the square. While Krista enjoyed crafts, cooking, and interior decorating, Bart was an avid golfer who was also remodeling their home. Bart worked as an accountant for BDO USA, and Krista worked as an administrative assistant at Zembrick Automotive. Both their sons were grown, and 24-year-old Mitchell was engaged to be married. 23-year-old Chandler, on the other hand, was enrolled at Madison College, where he was working towards a degree in information technology. He had also lined up a job with SpaceX. It appeared he had everything going for him. The only problem was, it was all a lie, and the family's lives were about to be ruined forever. The last family photo was on Father's Day in 2021, 12 days before the horrible tragedy. In the photo, Chandler can be seen wearing a neck brace after falling and suffering a concussion. It's unclear if that concussion played a role in the events that were about to unfold. On July 2, 2021, Krista failed to show up for work, which was very much out of character. Her coworker and friend, Daniel Croninger, had a bad feeling and attempted to call her, but there was no answer. So he drove over to her house and saw Chandler, who also lived in the home. He asked where Krista was, and he told him that his parents had gone to their family cabin at White Lake for the 4th of July weekend. He said they were not answering his calls or text messages either, and Daniel suggested he call the police. Chandler would then wait almost a week before reporting them missing. He told police that friends of his parents, who he wasn't familiar with, had picked them up on July 2nd to go to the cabin. He said they had already left when he woke up around 6:15 in the morning. He said he only heard from them once on July 4th. He also repeated this same story to multiple news outlets. When investigators began looking into their disappearances, they noticed Chandler was going door to door in the neighborhood, asking if they had seen or heard from his parents. On July 8th, Mitchell drove 3 hours north to the family cabin to look for them. Langade County Sheriff's deputies met him there, and together they searched the property but found no signs of Bart or Krista. It also appeared the cabin hadn't been used in a while. After speaking with friends and neighbors of the couple and not finding anything at the cabin, they began to realize that Chandler's story wasn't adding up, so they brought him in for questioning. During the 2-hour interview, Chandler changed his story and said his parents had gone to fix a plumbing problem at the cabin following a storm, and he even helped them pack some tools. They still weren't getting anywhere until a witness came forward and finally provided some crucial information. The woman said she saw a man matching Chandler's description on July 3rd on property owned by the Department of Natural Resources in Columbia County. The man was wearing a backpack and walking away from the Wisconsin River. She said he then did something odd. He walked away from his vehicle toward the highway before turning around and walking back to his car. He was then seen driving his vehicle in reverse with the rear hatch open in a field on a farm. Authorities went and searched the field and found partial human remains, including a male torso. While the search was going on, they questioned Chandler again, but this time he lawyered up. He was then arrested for providing false information about a missing person. Interestingly, on the morning of his arrest on July 8th, he made 6 Google searches that included body found and Bart and Krista. 2 days after his arrest, the remains were identified as belonging to Bart, and Chandler was subsequently charged with his father's murder. Those charges also included dismembering and hiding it. At this point, since they hadn't found any of Krista's remains, they weren't sure if she was alive or dead. It was then discovered that Chandler had shown up at his girlfriend Catherine Mellender's family's property in Cottage Grove on July 5th in his parents' Subaru. His girlfriend's mother's partner said he showed up at the property around 5:30 p.m. and then disappeared for over an hour. Catherine was brought in for questioning and told investigators that she kept tabs on Chandler through Snapchat because he had cheated on her before and agreed to let them download her data. Catherine had also noticed Chandler by the Wisconsin River on July 3rd and took screenshots of his location. By using Snapchat's location feature, they were finally able to locate Krista's remains near the town of Roxbury. This area was well known to Chandler because it was his favorite swimming hole. They also discovered footage of him from a store buying a blue tarp and 20 pounds of ice that were used in the disposal of his parents' remains. He then received 3 new charges: first-degree intentional homicide, as well as hiding and mutilation of a body. Prosecutors told a jury that they believed the motive was that his parents were about to discover that he had been lying about going to college and getting a job at SpaceX. The truth was, he had flunked out and written a bunch of fake emails to make his parents believe he was still enrolled. They also discovered that on July 1st, the day of the murder, Bart had a meeting scheduled with college officials. Clearly, they had suspected Chandler was lying to them. In the end, Chandler was found guilty on all charges and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Gabrielle Chloe Swainson was born on June 26, 1997, to parents Elvia Swainson and Alvin Thompson, and went by Gabby. In 2012, 15-year-old Gabby was living in Columbia, South Carolina, with her mother, Elvia, and was an honors student at Ridgeview High School. She played the guitar and performed with the Columbia City Jazz. She had a lot of aspirations until her life was sadly cut short. In the middle of the night on August 18, 2012, while her mother was at work, Gabby sadly disappeared. When Elvia arrived home and found her daughter gone, she quickly reported her missing. Elvia had unfortunately been in a relationship with 53-year-old Freddie Grant, who was a convicted felon, and he quickly became a person of interest. Authorities and volunteers organized search efforts for Gabby, and investigators were shocked when they saw Grant participating. 8 days after Gabby disappeared, Grant's home was searched, and inside, they found a box of shotgun shells and a box of .38 caliber bullets. Due to his past felony conviction, he was arrested on federal ammunition charges. 2 days later, he was also charged with kidnapping. His daughter, Dominique Grant, was also arrested after investigators discovered she had been hiding Gabby's cell phone. She was ultimately charged with accessory to kidnapping because there was no explanation for her phone to be in their possession. After she was arrested, investigators decided to use her as leverage against Grant, and it worked. 357 days after Gabby went missing, he took them to her remains. Her remains were discovered in a rural area just 3 miles from his home in a deep hole he had dug. Interestingly, this location was previously searched, but since he had buried her so deep and placed items on top of her, investigators said that not even cadaver dogs could have found her. An autopsy revealed that she had sadly been strangled to death, but they were unable to determine if she was sexually assaulted. It's believed that Grant entered Elvia's home with the key he still had and forced Gabby to leave with him. He then drove her 20 miles to his home in Elgin, South Carolina. It's unclear what happened at that point, but it's suspected that he sexually assaulted her and then strangled her to death. In 2013, he pleaded guilty to murder and kidnapping charges and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. However, the story doesn't end there because a year before Gabby was kidnapped and murdered, 28-year-old Adriana Diana Laster went missing after last being seen with Grant. She went missing on September 3, 2011, and was reported missing by her grandmother in Florida on March 17, 2012. The two had met in Miami, Florida, and she decided to move in with him at his home in South Carolina. Their relationship was very tumultuous, and the cops were called on numerous occasions. She would remain missing for over 12 years before finally being located in a sand pit at the Columbia Ridge landfill and Tri-D construction on January 12, 2024. A former neighbor and friend of his, by the name of Dank Belton, reported that he witnessed Grant slam Adriana's head into the side of his brick home. Dank called his wife at work asking what to do, and she told him to clean her up and put Neosporin on her, which he did. He then offered to take her to Sister Care, an organization for women in abusive relationships, but she refused to go. Family members of Adriana said she had called them and told them about the abuse. She said that he even broke her ankle one time and had knocked teeth out of her mouth. They begged her to come back to Florida, but she allegedly refused help from them as well. During the course of the relationship, he was issued 3 different warrants for assaulting her, one in November of 2010 and the other 2 in April and June of 2011. It's unclear why he was never arrested for those. He's also a person of interest in the murder of 36-year-old Daniel Lee Wood, who was killed after being shot 3 times in October of 2011. On the day of his murder, Daniel had been drinking outside around a fire with several people when he and Grant got into an argument. There's also a possible 4th victim, a woman he married in the late 1990s. She had died in 2004 of an apparent heart attack, but now her mother, Mabel Rotan, believes her daughter's death should be looked at closer. Grant has plagued this world for far too long, but hopefully, now that all this is coming to light, justice will be served and he will never be released.
It spent more than that on the lot thing, didn't it, honey? Doesn't it?
Hold on a second. Wait, let off the gas.
Gotta run up there.
Let off the gas. Mike! Woman!
Mariah K. Woods was born to parents Alex and Krista on November 8, 2014, and lived with muscular dystrophy. Once she was a little older, she was required to wear a pair of medical shoes to help her walk properly. In 2017, 3-year-old Mariah was living in Jacksonville, North Carolina, with her mother, Krista, 2 brothers, and her mother's boyfriend, 32-year-old Adolphus Kimry II, who went by Earl. Unfortunately, Earl was addicted to drugs and was spending upwards of $100 a day on his habit. Unfortunately, his actions due to his drug habit would lead to a horrible tragedy. On November 26, 2017, between 8 and 8:30 p.m., the family arrived home, unloaded the car, and everyone went to bed except for Earl. He stayed up playing video games, doing drugs, and left the house a couple of times in the middle of the night. The following morning at 6:26, he called 911 to report that Mariah was strangely missing. He said he had gone to wake up the kids for school, but Mariah was not in her room, and he couldn't find her. He told the dispatcher that he saw her in bed at about 8:30 p.m. the night before. However, Krista would tell a different story. She said a smoke alarm in the home had been going off, which they blamed on the bugs in the wall. This was waking up Mariah and causing her to cry. So at around 11 p.m., Krista went in there to comfort her and tell her to go back to sleep. Krista had 70% hearing loss and wasn't as bothered by the noise and went back to bed. Earl, on the other hand, left the house around that time and went to the Friendly Mart gas station but didn't buy anything and returned home. It's possible he met his drug dealer in the gas station's parking lot. He then told investigators that he left again in the middle of the night and drove to an abandoned house on High Hill Road to pick up some furniture he had been storing, which he planned to sell so that they could pay the electric bill. Some people believe the money was actually going towards more drugs. Regardless, he said he loaded 2 sofas into the back of his van and arrived back home between 3 and 3:30 a.m. He said he played some more video games before falling asleep in his chair about 45 minutes later. After Mariah was reported missing, an Amber Alert was issued and a massive search involving hundreds of volunteers got underway. When investigators searched the home, they noticed some pink footy pajamas on the floor, and Christy confirmed those were the pajamas Mariah had been wearing. They also seized a section of wall, trash cans, bleach, duct tape, syringes, and a shovel. The day after she disappeared, on November 28, 2017, a neighbor reported seeing something strange on the night Mariah went missing. They said they saw Earl loading something into his 1996 blue Plymouth van that was bigger than a book bag. They then saw him leave the mobile home park. Investigators searched his van and found a pink jacket, dressers, zip ties, white socks, and white toddler pants. After searching the home and his van and not finding Mariah, they went to the abandoned house he claimed he had been at, but she wasn't there either. He was then brought in for questioning and openly admitted to being addicted to meth, which had basically destroyed his life. It kept him from holding down a job, and he even gave up his young daughter, whom he had been caring for. On December 2, 2017, 5 days after being reported missing, a dive team was searching Shelter Creek, 30 miles away in Pender County, North Carolina, when they discovered Mariah's body. Her remains were wrapped in 3 plastic trash bags that were inside a zipped couch cushion cover. Also inside were chunks of cement and rocks used to weigh it down. An autopsy found that she had a bruise near her left eye, some scrapes on her face, and 2 hemorrhages on the scalp. However, there were no signs that she had been sexually assaulted or beaten to death. So, how did she die? When the medical examiner received the toxicology report, they were shocked to discover that her cause of death was chloroform poisoning. After finding Mariah's body, Earl was quickly arrested and charged with concealing her death. He and Christy were given polygraph tests, and while she passed, Earl failed. He told investigators that on the night she went missing, he accidentally killed her, panicked, and dumped her body in the creek. More of the story was discovered after 2 jail informants came forward and said that Earl admitted to using chloroform to help Mariah sleep while he used meth, and that Christy never knew about it. Sadly, Mariah's father, Alex, had apparently discovered the abuse and had filed court documents to challenge Christy's full custody, but she died before it ever went to court. In 2022, Earl pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison. Shannon Hiott was born to parents Jim and Jamie on February 25, 1994. Shannon was described as a kind individual who could be very silly at times. She also loved cats and Halloween. In 2017, she graduated with a Bachelor of Psychology from Ohio State University. By 2023, 29-year-old Shannon was living in Columbus, Ohio, and had recently landed her dream job as a fraud investigator with Nationwide Insurance. Unfortunately, she had been in a tumultuous relationship with 27-year-old Chance Donahoe for about a year and a half before finally breaking things off after she discovered he was stealing from her. Not only had he stolen money, but he was also stealing her prescription medications. However, he wasn't happy about the breakup, and a week after asking him to move out, she would be dead. After the breakup, she feared for her safety and had the locks changed and security cameras installed. She also blocked him from all her social media accounts and blocked his phone number. In order to avoid seeing him, she had friends take his belongings to him. It seems like she was doing all the right things. Unfortunately, Shannon didn't fully block him, and on August 28, 2023, he saw a post she made about being much happier since the breakup. Upset, he drove to her home and watched as another man, whom he didn't recognize, parked outside. Now in a rage, he drove the 20 miles back to the home in Powell where he had been staying, changed into all black clothing, grabbed a knife, and drove back to her house. It wasn't helped that he was doing drugs and drinking while all of this was going on. Once back at her house, he broke in and stabbed her to death in what was described as an extreme overkill. In total, there were over 30 stab wounds. Afterward, he sexually assaulted her remains and smoked a cigarette. Before fleeing her home, he screwed her front door shut to prevent her body from being discovered. After leaving, he went to his mother's house, called 911, and confessed to the murder. He then drove to the Sheetz gas station in Liberty Township, Ohio, just under 100 miles from Columbus, and turned himself in. Sadly, Shannon's family found out about the devastating news about her death while watching the news. In the end, he pleaded guilty to murder and abuse of a corpse, and on August 8, 2024, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 31 years.